Hey guys, my name is Andrew Henderson from Nomad Capitalist and nomadcapitalist.com. I am here in my new pied-à-terre, as you will, in Tbilisi, Georgia, one of my hubs, where it is the end of summer, yet I'm wearing a sweater because it is 15 degrees centigrade to accommodate some floor covering that needs to have the coolest of air. So I'm in a sweater, and you can see, things are coming together. I've got furniture that's on its way, and I wanted to make a video for you guys because I was giving this some thought. I'm here in one of my homes. I've got homes in different places around the world that I like to call home. I spend my time in all kinds of different places, looking at deals, looking at opportunities, seeing how the world works. And it got me thinking, what is the difference between this offshore stuff that we talk about? What are the misconceptions? What is it that people don't quite understand? And what I boiled it down to was there's an offshore world that existed before. Somewhat of it was folklore, but some of it existed before, in the 70s, the 80s. And how does this stuff work now? Because there are so many misconceptions, and I think it's really important that people understand how this offshore stuff works. So, back in the 60s, the 70s, even the 80s, there were the Swiss bank accounts, there were the numbered bank accounts, the anonymous bank accounts. People would have money and the banker would come and pick it up and maybe get in a plane and fly it back to Switzerland. People would take money on planes and go to banks in Panama. It's been romanticized and covered in all sorts of movies, on the news media, on TV shows. People still have this idea that this is how the offshore world works. And here's the secret that nobody tells you. That offshore world was illegal back then, in that people weren't doing it by the book. People were cutting corners. People were doing things that were illegal. People were setting up bank accounts and not reporting them. They were not declaring income. Those things were always crimes. Having a business and siphoning off a bunch of money in cash and putting it on a speedboat to Aruba was never legal. And yet that's how people still understand the offshore world today. And what happens is, and what we try and do at Nomad Capitalist, is educate people to understand that there are millions of business owners out there right now in the US, in the UK, in Canada, in Australia, all around the world, who are paying a lot more money than they have to pay, who are dealing with more regulations, fewer freedoms than they could get elsewhere, and who are able to grow their businesses and grow their wealth slower by staying where they're at right now because they're operating on this old offshore world. Today's offshore world, to me, is a world that is open to everybody. When you look back at the Swiss banking, when you look back at what was happening in the 70s, for example, this was kind of like, if you knew somebody, you'd get a connection to a banker, or maybe you went to a seminar or something, and it just was all kind of hush-hush. It wasn't discussed. And it was only open to an exclusive group of people. And again, a lot of what was happening was just illegal. Even though they didn't have the reporting mechanisms and all the different things that are in place today to force transparency, it was still illegal, what a lot of people were doing. But the underlying principle of, as we say here at Nomad Capitalist, going where you're treated best is still fundamentally sound. How does the offshore world today differ from back then? To me, one of the big words is transparency. That's been a big thing we've tried to do here at Nomad Capitalist pretty much from the beginning, was you have a world that, in my opinion, was still clinging to this idea of secrecy and using fake names and, hiding behind, pictures of guys in masks. And I said that, that's not going to cater to the average guy who lives in Sydney, who's selling stuff on Amazon, making $500,000 a year, and he's saying, what, if I had an extra 200 grand a year, if I took that money I'm paying in tax and put it back into my business, I'd make millions of dollars more before I sell this thing. That guy doesn't want to hear about the Swiss bank account. That guy wants to follow the rules. And so now we have a world that we didn't have back in the 70s, where anyone can start a business online. You can do it, for $9. There are thousands of people who will teach you how to make money, from starting out at $1,000 a month to guys who are teaching people how to make multi-millions of dollars running businesses that can be run from a laptop. that can be run from a phone. That didn't exist back then. And so now you have the ability to, as the saying goes, move not just your assets. You know, that was what you moved in the 70s. You were sitting in the United States, for example, and you were shipping your money somewhere else. You were in the US, you were subject to US tax law, but yet your assets were somewhere else. That was what was illegal. Now, to put it crudely, you can move your ass. You don't have to sit in Skokie, Illinois, or, you know, Topeka, Kansas, and run your business, run your factory, do whatever it is that you're doing. You can run your virtual factory, sourcing products from China, you know, selling them through Amazon, selling them through Shopify, you know, doing a SaaS, everything's, you know, online. You can run that kind of business being anywhere in the world. And so that opens up your ability to be part of the new offshore economy, which is transparent, which is if there's an obligation to report something, you do it. If there's an obligation for you to be in a certain place or, you know, adjust your lifestyle accordingly, or not have bank accounts in certain countries, or not do certain things, then you do that. There is a legal strategy to where you can distance yourself from the place where you live right now, the place where you're paying that 30 or 40 or 50% tax, and you can go where you're treated best. And so the difference as I sit here in my house, outside of the country of my birth, is I've created a strategy where I can legally reduce my tax by like 95%, because I'm willing to do what it takes. And if there's a form to be filled out, I'll fill out the form. Now, ultimately, you know, once you figure out, okay, here's the forms I've got to fill out, maybe then the next step is, okay, how do I reduce the forms? But there's at least a strategy that everyone can get to, where the average person who didn't have access to the Swiss banker 30 or 40 years ago can now go and open a bank account in Singapore for $1,000, or in, you know, Romania, or here in Georgia, or in so many places around the world. Now, the bank account alone won't save you, because again, I mean, just putting your money in a bank doesn't change your tax situation. So there's a whole series of steps that you need to follow. And to me, that's what makes offshore in the 21st century different from offshore in the 20th century, is that you're doing it legally, but there's a lot of things that you need to consider. Where are you living? Where are you banking? Where's your business based? Where are your employees based? These are all things that allow you to create a legal strategy where you're not relying on some guy to put your money in a briefcase and fly it somewhere else. You're doing the stuff, you're in control, and it feels real. It feels normal. It feels okay that if you're just that guy who is in Miami selling stuff online, it feels real to say, okay, if I live in Panama and my company's here and I bank here, then that seems like that can work. And yes, I've got to follow these laws and I've got to maybe file some papers, but it's not just sitting around and doing something shady. That's what's changed. And obviously the news media is not going to tell you that. The TV shows, all the media thrive on, you know, still talking about the numbered bank account or bearer shares or all these things that don't exist anymore. To me, the 21st century offshore approach is all about pragmatism. It's all about saying, I want to be compliant, I want to be legal, I want to do things properly. I'm not, you know, running from the government. I'm doing things by the letter, but I'm taking advantage of the laws that are available to me to keep more of my own money and to keep more of my freedom. That's the big difference to me. That's why I'm standing here. And I think it's important that people understand the difference, because what I've tried to do is open up the eyes of so many millions of business owners who can benefit from this, but they only want to do it if it feels right. And to me, that's the key. If you want to learn more about the nomad capitalist lifestyle, a lot of the strategies we talk about, definitely subscribe to our channel. I'd also love to hear your comments. Leave a comment here in the comment section before you go. And if you're just trying to figure this stuff out, if you're new, watch some of the videos. Get my book on Amazon, Nomad Capitalist, available on Amazon. If you've been watching for a while and you've been thinking to yourself, you know, I'd like to save some tax, I'd like to build a nomad capitalist lifestyle, then head on over to nomadcapitalist.com. That's where we have more of the advanced stuff. So there is a path for everyone, whether you're new or whether you've been looking into this stuff for a while, there's a way to get you on the path to building a lifestyle that serves you and lets you keep a lot more of your own money, because it does add up over time. Thanks for watching.